Hi, I'm Stefanie Brown James, co-founder and executive director of the Collective, and I am so excited to have this conversation with you all today. This is such an important conversation because we know that 2020 is a historic year for so many reasons. And we know that Black women have and will continue to lead the revolution, to be on the forefront of the movement, fighting for better changes, fighting for progress in our communities. You know, from Hollywood to Congress to our communities at our front door, Black women have courageously been standing at the forefront of progress and are trailblazing so many paths forward, rooted in love, in compassion, and support of one another. And so today we are excited to bring to you this special virtual summit called Black Women Leading the Revolution, an opportunity for us to hear from some of our foremost leaders around the country who are fighting every single day to make this country better for Black people and all Americans, to be frank. And so we are kicking off our summit with a special conversation with some women I have just been fortunate to learn from for many years, and just and truly honored and humbled that they are spending their time with us today. And so we are joined in this conversation by none other than the Congresswoman, who I think has really been able to be a beacon of light to show that it's important that we not forget our communities as we rise, and that is Congresswoman Ayanna Pressley from the Boston area of Massachusetts. We are also joined today by activist, educator, writer, Miss Brittany Packnett. And we are also joined today by activist, founder of Black Lives Matter, a woman who is not only shaping change here in America, but across the globe as well, Miss Opal Tometi. And so we have, as you see, a dynamic panel for you today, and we're going to get right into the conversation. But first, I want to say hi, ladies. How are you?
Hey. Hi. And we also have Stefanie Brown James.
Well. Listen, I you know what, I firmly believe.
Visionary.
Let me tell you, thank you for saying that, Congresswoman. And I would say that to be able to go through life and meet women who can be such supporters and such examples of how you want to shape your life and how you want to live your life has really been a blessing for me. And so thank you for saying that, Congresswoman. I just applaud all the work that you all do. And I think it's important to even start this conversation about Black women leading the revolution by starting with the three of you all, just telling us a little bit of, like, we were all little girls once, and I'm sure this is not the career that you had envisioned for yourself. Fighting for Black people probably wasn't what you maybe said, you know, as a 10-year-old girl. But maybe you did have the viewpoint that you were going to be a change agent, you know, a fighter for social justice. So I want to know, like, what has led you to where you are now in your place as a leader in this country, and a person that's fighting for justice for all Black people? I think I'll actually start with Brittany on that one.
I'm happy to. I am absolutely one of those kids who thought this was always what I would be doing. I didn't really see any other options in what I had modeled for me. Both of my parents were activists, community leaders. My father was a pastor and a Black liberation theologian. My mother was an educator and a higher ed administrator, and built structures specifically for students of color and first generation college students. So I, growing up, learned like a brown skinned, woolly haired, table flipping, don't take no Jesus. I don't know any other way to operate. That was always set forth as the aspiration. And I was always very intentionally rooted in the legacy of a people who dreamed impossible dreams, no matter what the obstacles were. And so in this moment when I think cynicism and fatalism are really attractive because of the danger that we face every single day, the existential crisis and threat that we wake up to every morning in the middle of multiple simultaneous pandemics, I actually find myself returning to those roots every time it might be easier to choose cynicism. I return to those roots grateful that generations before me chose to fight instead of to give up. I recognize that I would not be here if there were folks who just threw up their hands and said, well, it's impossible and nothing's gonna work, so we might as well just give up now. And so I really don't know any other work. This is the only work I ever wanted to do.
And you do it so well.
So glad to do it. Yes.
Congresswoman?
You know, I have to say these discussions are so challenging for me because I just want to listen to my sisters all day. I don't even want to speak. They move me every single time. And as I've said so many times, I'll never give short shrift to Black girl magic. But what I know a lot more about from my mother's example and from all three of yours is Black woman work. And, you know, what each of you prove in the various roles that you have assumed and the hats that you wear is that we belong everywhere. And, you know, that is the self-agency and self-determination with which my mother had an expectation that I would move. You know, may she rest in peace and power. So I guess I'm a Chicago cliche in that I grew up in an activist household. My mother was a tenants' rights organizer. That was one of many jobs that she held. She was a tenants' rights organizer, a community activist. She told me that there's a difference in life between your job and your work. Your job is what pays the bills, but your work with a capital W is the work that you do to advance the upliftment and the advancement of your community. And so I've been Black with a capital B since Gwendolyn Brooks demanded that I be. And then, you know, finally my mother made sure I knew that as beautiful as it is to be Black and as proud that I should be to be Black, that I was being born into a struggle. And it was a cradle to grave struggle, and that she had an expectation that I would play my part in that struggle to realize the collective emancipation and full liberation of all people, but especially Black folks. So I hope that in word and deed every day, that I am honoring the tradition of Black women, that I'm honoring the tradition and the expectation of my mother.
I love that. Thank you. Thank you. Opal?
So I'm just honored to be here and so grateful to be sharing space with you all and to hear your stories in more depth. Similarly, I am so inspired every single time I am with you and hearing what you have to say. Your brilliance is unmatched. I love Black women. I'll just start off by just sharing that I too was raised in the church. So, like,
Me for, like, look at us.
Right? Like, so this tradition of faith and understanding our sense of being and our worthiness that is inherent because we are created in the image of the Creator, and that we were born, and so by virtue of our presence on the planet means we belong, and that we are worthy of dignity and respect. That was instilled in me from day one. And, you know, I'll share that both being somebody who was kind of raised in the church, my father was a pastor, my mom's a nurse, they're immigrants from Nigeria. I was born and raised in Phoenix, Arizona. So, you know, young Black girl in one of the most conservative states in the country, and really ground zero for the anti-immigrant movement. I was, you know, faced with a lot of challenges, and the community that I had there was a rather tight-knit Nigerian immigrant community. And within that space, what I experienced from an early age was, you know, various attacks on the immigrants that I knew and loved, and the people of color, and, you know, even beyond my own immediate family and my immediate aunts and uncles, you know, faced with, you know, issues with driving while Black, issues with different promotions being passed over them in the workplace, issues with their education system and beyond. And so from an early age, I watched as how our communities were under real, you know, acute attack. But I also saw that this beautiful community that I was born into fought and asserted their dignity and did what they can with very, very little. And thankfully, my journey brought me to the work that I'm doing today.
Thank you. And thank you for sharing, Opal. And what I hear from all three of you is a real sense of purpose, of drive, of passion. And I think about in our communities, you know, this conversation is about Black women leading the revolution. And Black women have always led the revolution. I mean, you look at Sojourner Truth, and you know, you look at Dorothy Height, and you look at Ella Baker, and you look at Dr. Pauli Murray, and all these women who have always been leading, been fighting, been making changes happen to better this country and the human condition. It almost seems like only recently, though, has everybody else really realized or wanted to take like a full look at that Black women have been doing this for a long time. But yet, at least on a national level, but I think in our own communities, sometimes Black women feel as though they don't know how to have their service and their leadership shine in a way where they can take ownership of being community leaders. And so wanted to just get your thoughts on, for the Black women that are working to lead the revolution right outside their doorways, how can they feel most empowered to be able to take ownership of their purpose, of their leadership, and know that, yes, you can lead this revolution, and most importantly, we need you to.
You know, Cori Bush and I were having a conversation the other day, and she said, you know, Black women have done everything, and now that people recognize that, they want to sort of keep piling on. And her point was that, you know, for so long our labor has been free, it's been exploited, it's been, co-opted and credited to other people. And she's like, you know, we're going to do what we always do, but can Black women lead without carrying? And so it really, and I'm still reflecting on that. Is it possible to lead without carrying? Can you just do that in your example? And the other thing is that, you know, and Brittany speaks so eloquently to this when we were talking about the transition of Representative Lewis, and she talked about, you know, the incredible thing of living at a time when an elder transitions to ancestor. And what that reminded me is that, you know, my mother is an ancestor, but very often when we think ancestor, we just ascribe that to iconic people, you know, to a Harriet Tubman, to a Sojourner Truth. No, what I want people to recognize is the revolution. If you're keeping your Black family together, that is leading the revolution. Right. Everyone is not going to pick up a bullhorn or be on a dais or be in a pulpit or be on the front lines. You know, I just think that really it's about each of us authentically leading and lending our gifts. So, you know, that is the tradition that we have honored. We have been at the fore of every great movement because we've been at the fore of social change. And so we have to continue to honor that. But I do think it's important, sisters, that while we hold space for that righteous rage, that we tell the truth about our need to hold comparable space for our radical joy and healing. And to do that unapologetically, and not so that we can restore ourselves for the utility of our work, but because we just deserve to have joy and to be healed.
That's a joyful warrior. That's, yes. Go ahead, Brittany.
Sit here and listen. I'm just like, oh, okay, yes, praise God. This whole sermon. I mean, I think you said so. Everyone has said so many brilliant things already. I think one of the things to add for me that I'm particularly convicted around is feeling empowered to lead authentically. We know that it is human nature to build and center around and begin to worship archetypes, right? We know that there are archetypes that are preferred in Congress. That's why there's so many white men that are sitting next to Congresswoman Pressley. We know that there are archetypes of spokespeople and media voices, right? That is why so many white folks and white men in particular are in anchor seats. But we also know that in our community, we create archetypes, right? And that you have to look a certain way, dress a certain way, talk a certain way, and not only embody the archetype, but fit so perfectly within it that you never make a mistake. The truth is that we are all in a process of evolution if we are doing it right, which means I should be smarter, better, more thorough tomorrow than I am today. And I think that this example that you gave, Congresswoman, about being corrected on the word is an important lesson for us all, because what you lived into in that moment was your authenticity to say, I didn't know, Now I do, and so I'm going to go do better. And I think so often we feel like we have to ascribe to one of those archetypes in order to be taken seriously, that we have to show up in the space in a way that's different from who we are. And if you are consistently worried about showing up as your representative, we won't actually be able to make use of all of the authentic gifts that you have to offer uniquely, because you'll be spending all your time and energy trying to be somebody else. So if you are the organizer at the front of the march, then great. If you are like me, the person who was often at the back of the march trying to make sure nobody was left behind, that's important too. If you are like Mama Cat in Ferguson and you are the one not only feeding people from your own kitchen, but teaching people the skills to become a pot banger, which is what she calls her organization for housing insecure folks who are developing those skills, right? Then that's what you need to offer, instead of trying to become somebody that you're not. And the power of that is that you give other people permission to evolve, to grow, to learn in public and in private, and to show up as their full selves. When we are doing that intentionally, especially as Black women, unconsciously, we make so much room for other people. And I think that making room for other people, especially as I think about the war that our trans sisters endure every single day, making room for other people always has to be our business. And sharing that power is actually what makes us more powerful.
Yes.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
You know, that's brilliant. I would also add that being a woman in leadership and a Black woman in leadership is oftentimes also about risk, right? We risk a lot to stand up and be the first in many scenarios. We risk a lot to, put something together like a Black Lives Matter and then have the type of trolls and the hate speech and the attacks and all of that. We risk a lot when we do make these very courageous stands for justice. And I'm thinking about my sisters right now, like Ijoma Olu, who had her house raided at one point, or Melina Abdullah, where the police converged on their homes and really scared their family and their kids. And I think about the tremendous amount of risk and sacrifice that many of our sisters are making on behalf of the entire community. And I think it should not be lost on us that this is glamorous, like leadership is some wonderful, thing where you're like sitting on some high horse and it's all, roses and butterflies all the time. But it's hard, right? It's difficult, it's tough calls, and it's a lot of sacrifice. And so while I love to celebrate us, and we should be celebrating us, we should also be acknowledging the fact that, yeah, it's not always easy, but the fact of the matter is that our communities are worth it. And that because of the unique position that Black women are in, we bear the brunt of the acute impact of oppression, of systemic racism, of systemic patriarchy and beyond. And so we, no matter what, have to do what we can to stand up and to push back and to advocate for ourselves and those that we love so dearly. We have no choice but to lead.
Can I ask?
I feel like,
Stefanie?
yes, please.
Just build a little bit on. I worry if our bonds of community are overwhelmingly forged in our trauma and our resistance all the time. And so what I found so powerful about Black Lives Matter, and to Brittany's point around archetypes, let's just tell the truth. Our organizing spaces have been elitist spaces. Mm-hmm. And we have perpetuated an archetype. And so what was beautiful about Black Lives Matter is like, yes, it's holding us accountable and say, you will say the names and you will acknowledge of the murder of Black trans women, and you will acknowledge our genius, because we're over here leading this movement because other tables and other rooms didn't invite us in. And so, yes, I'm going to hold space for, and you will acknowledge the brutality we experience, but you will acknowledge our genius too. Because we are the architects of this movement right here, in a way that was not acknowledged when you talk about the LGBT movement. That would not have existed were it not for queer and trans women of color, right? And so we're just now getting that history right. But I'm grateful that when it comes to the origins of BLM, it will be very clear. Yes. And that is because women like all of you make sure that that is not being whitewashed and revised.
It feels that Black women have so much power. Is there something that we're overlooking in how we are maximizing our power to create the systemic changes we want and need to see for Black people? Like, is there anything that we need to be doing now? And especially in this year where this is a consequential election, how are we and how do we need to go harder to maximize our power to create the changes that we need for our communities?
So I teach and speak on power all the time because it is the central issue. Every injustice we have ever faced is a matter of power. Who hasn't? Who has it? Who doesn't have it? Who has access to create more? And who has the ability to lessen other people's power, right? Everything comes down to power. And in a society that is steeped in white, middle class, Western, heteronormative, dominant culture, there is a belief that we are all ingesting all the time, that power is a finite resource, that power is a pie and there are only so many slices to go around, right? So this is why, as an example, we continue to see generational wealth hoarded among a very tiny group of people. Why? Because those folks pass down money and opportunities, property and companies to the same people over and over again in their lineages and in their circles. So they have hoarded financial resources and financial power while the rest of us are competing for the scraps that are left over, right? Because we treat it like it's a finite resource. Power, though, we have to understand that as Black women, as Black people, we actually do not have to subscribe to that definition of power. We do not have to subscribe to the idea that power is a finite and scarce resource. We can actually redefine it as something that is fully abundant because it already lives in us, right? And that Opal living fully into her power, and Steph, you living fully into your power, and Congresswoman, you fully living into your power is not a threat to me fully living into mine. And when we get back to our roots as people about communal property, about communal uplift, about the value of sharing instead of hoarding, we can actually topple the systems and structures that continue to harm us. And I mean this so sincerely. I'm not talking about this in some kind of esoteric realm. I'm being really intentional and very tangible here. That if we recognize that shared power is the best power, then that means that cis women are not out here beefing with trans women. That means that we're making room for women who are educated and women who have not had the opportunity to get their degrees, instead of calling them ghetto and saying, well, you don't say this right or you don't present the right way. We're talking to our women in the Bible Belt and not treating them as if, well, you've ingested too much patriarchy to be of any worth here, right? We're not ignoring our Midwestern Black women. I want to raise my hand as one of them, right? We exist. Or our Southwestern Black women, because Opal, you might be the only Black person some people know from Arizona, but there are more of y'all, right? There are so many ways in which we build divisions among ourselves that don't need to exist. Why do we do that? Because we have ingested the idea that power is a scarce resource. So if we only keep it among the talented 10th, or we only keep it among the well-heeled, or we only keep it among the people who know all of the right words to say at every organizing meeting, then we will hold on to the little bit of power that we got instead of sharing power, and that's what our roots really are. So in our organizing, in our building, in our conversations, if we are intentional about getting outside of our preferred circles and bringing in women and learning from women that are outside of our spaces, we can actually begin to build the collective power that we really, really do have. And we can get our folks elected, we can get our ballot measures passed, we can get our city ordinances signed off on, we can close jailhouses, we can open schools, we can do whatever we want to do if we collect and harness our power together instead of hoarding it from one another because we're convinced that it's scarce. It's not. Power is abundant. And if we treat it like that, we can win.
Woo. I just co-sign all of that. I don't have nothing else to say. I don't know if that was just a word. That was a TED Talk. I actually am okay with you editing out Every part of
No,
me
don't do that.
totally useless. Honestly, that was a word.
It was a
do we
word.
call this one?
It was a word, and it was a challenge.
Scholar, thought leader. That was a word.
But it's a challenge to all of us,
It
right?
is a challenge, yeah.
If we really sat down right now and asked ourselves to evaluate the relationships with other Black women that we have, who are not our type, if you will, how many names would be on your list? Like, how many Black women who do not come from where you come from, don't identify as you identify, don't share your privileges, do you have real relationship with? Do you learn from and who learn from you? Do you build with and build with you? If we're not constantly auditing our lives like that, and I'm including myself here, then we're not doing that work of power sharing.
You know what I love about you three is that you are fearless and you are focused on your work, but all three of you live with so much joy and you allow your joy to be seen. That's why, I love the term joyful warrior, because I think it surmises you all so much. And it can be disheartening many days and depressing many days. And you are just like, I am not getting out this bed. And so I want to know, as we close, and you can kind of also just give your closing thoughts in this response as well. What makes you hopeful? What makes you joyful? What makes you know that Black people will win? What is it that gets you out of the bed in the mornings and is like, I'm ready to go? And I'm so happy to be this Black woman that I am. I will start with Opal, actually.
I love this question because my middle name is actually Everlasting Joy, Titilaya. It's Yoruba. So my parents named me for that. And I believe it's our birthright, right? I feel like this is our birthright, both the dignity that we deserve, but also the ability to live our lives to the most fullest expression and experience the joy that is, what our human experience should also be about. And what gives me so much joy is actually being with Black women. So opportunities like this, seeing my young godkids and my young goddaughters also see themselves celebrated and reflected in our world, understanding more and more what the movement is about, but also having it distilled in a way that is so clear also to young people. What also brings me joy is seeing young people from all different walks of life also declare that Black lives matter. And while I know it's should not be taken for granted that as generations shift, we're going to have some kind of magical, everyone's going to understand racial justice and we're going to have this equitable world. No, we can't take that for granted. However, I do see that there has been some shifts, and there are a lot more people from different walks of life who are stepping up and showing up for our movement. And that includes gorgeous young people around the country. And I've been really heartened to see so many videos from different people that I know and people that I don't know who show me that their children are learning and that they're going to ensure that the next generation is part of this struggle. And then the last piece I would say is that I am also so heartened to see that our groups are getting some more support now, right? We do see that there's this call for investment, for reallocation of resources, and we're seeing pockets where this is happening. We're seeing the redistribution of wealth. It's not wholesale, it's not at a scale that we really need and we deserve. However, we're seeing these pockets and these pictures of possibility emerge across the country. And I think with that, I would just encourage people to look out for the March for Black Women that the Black Women's Blueprint is hosting on, I believe it's September 26th. I'm just gonna give them a little shout out because I love the work that they've been doing with Black women for so many years. And I encourage all of us to show up for that virtual rally that's gonna be taking place on the 26th as we uplift Black women, our leadership, our concerns, we all get free. And that's just it.
Love it. Love it. Thank you, Opal. Brittany?
Very quickly, on Juneteenth this year, which for the first time felt like a truly global or a truly national holiday rather, in the most beautiful way. I was just reflecting on the miracle of Black life, in that across the world, colonization, degradation, enslavement, sought to use us and lose us. It literally sought to take our labor, take our wealth, take our greatest assets, and leave us on the side of the road. And the fact that we are still here, creating, thriving, living, breathing, yes, fighting, but also experiencing joy. The fact that we are alive is a miracle, because it was genuinely not only not promised, it was not intended to go that way. And so when I think of the miracle of Black life, miracles are to be celebrated. I mean, we're all church girls, you know, Jesus out here performing miracles, we shouting, right? So I'm gonna shout just as much for the miracle of Black life and experience the joy of that. Opal, I love that. The joy is our birthright, because it absolutely is. And somebody fought hard to make sure that we could experience that joy. And so I'm not gonna give that up for anybody. And so in so many ways, the ancestors give me hope, because they did far more with far less than we have at our fingertips right now, and made a way and blazed trails that people thought were impossible. And the present makes me hopeful, because the choir keeps getting bigger, right? The team keeps growing. It may not be as big as it should be, but most certainly there are folks who are signing up and staying signed up more and more every single day. And the fact that more and more people are linking arm in arm to do what is right, because it's always time to do what's right, that gives us the opportunity not to hang our hopes on a couple of saviors, but to build the strongest team that we can, and then benefit from all of the creativity and innovation and the discipline of courage that all of those new team members will bring to bear. So I'm grateful for this conversation. I'm grateful for each of you. You all give me hope, and I hope everybody out there listening feels some hope too.
Thank you, Brittany. Congresswoman, bring us on home.
I wasn't planning on being that deep. I was gonna say that versus challenge between Monica and Brandy gave me a lot of joy. I just want to say that. But no, but in all seriousness, you know, look, when I took my oath of office 2 years ago in DC, I came back to the district 2 weeks later, did a ceremonial swearing in with 400 members of community in Roxbury, glorious Roxbury, historic Roxbury Community College. And we took a community pledge together, because I believe in doing this work in symbiotic partnership. And, you know, one of the tenets of our pledge was that I will inform joy, as it is a necessary act of resistance. And so I'll just say to folks, be unapologetic in that. I took a couple of days with my husband, and one of the things that's been giving me joy lately is bike riding, because I really want to feel, you know, if my knees were good, I would be jumping double dutch, because what I'm trying to get back to is just this freedom from fear, right? And the freedom to move and the self-agency of your body, right? So I love bike riding. So we went away for a couple of days, was bike riding, and then I learned that there had been some violence in my district, and immediately I felt I needed to come back. I want us to give ourselves permission. You know, we're living in times where they are coming for our humanity, a livable planet, our dignity, our civil rights, our civil liberties. Don't give them your joy too. And be unapologetic in that. And again, I don't want you to be joyful so that you are more restored and fortified to do the work. Your value is about more than the utility of what you contribute. You know, so those are all the things giving me joy right now. Sisterhood, all of you, the movement, and just everyone, please give yourself permission to fight for the preservation of your joy. Don't give them that too.
Well, this has been nothing but a joyful experience, empowering, educational, challenging. I am filled with gratitude, and I want to just say thank you, ladies. And I love that, Congressman, you ended us on a point of our work is important, but it is not holistically all that we are. And that so much that happens outside of the work we do is also important. And I think being able to spend time with each other in conversation and commune together is so important. So thank you, ladies. Thank you.
When is the next Zoom? And I don't want it to be recorded. When is the next Zoom? That's what I
want.
Brittany, now you know how I feel about wine, girl.
I know you do. That's why I want it.
I'm gonna text y'all after this, and then we'll figure out when we're gonna have our own little thing. You know what I mean? But with that being said, thank you all for joining us today. On behalf of the collective, we are so happy that you all have tuned in to this conversation where we are talking about the power of Black women leading the revolution. And I would be remiss if I did not say vote. Vote early, or vote on election day, November 3rd, but vote with all the power that you have within you. Thank you again for joining in. We'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.